As dawn approached, Shackleton recorded,
"The weather was very thick in the morning. Indeed, at 7 a.m. we were right under the cliffs, which plunged sheer to the sea before we saw them."
Elephant Island. The men had been 7 bleak days at sea, over 5 months on ice floes, and it was 497 days since they'd touched land.
My grandfather was going to be given the privilege of the first man to ever set foot on Elephant Island. At this order, Shackleton said, "Come on, you're the first one, you've got the privilege." He didn't move.
Shackleton didn't waste any time.
In order to avoid delay, I helped him, perhaps a little roughly, over the side of the boat. He promptly sat down in the surf and did not move. Then I suddenly realized what I had forgotten, that both his feet were frostbitten badly. He collapsed. He couldn't stand.
The tough Australian Hurley noted,
"The landing was effected, but just in the eve of time, for so many of the party were emaciated by exhaustion, fatigue and exposure that they could not have survived another 12 hours. Many suffered from temporary aberration, walking aimlessly about, others shivering as with palsy."
Men reeled along the beach as if drunk, some burying their faces in the stones. Woody recalled more chilling behavior.
"Some fellows were half crazy. One got an axe and did not stop until he had killed about 10 seals.
Shackleton ordered food prepared. It was the first hot meal in 3 days. Hurley expressed their relief.
Tents were hastily erected, all turned in, and almost instantly were deep in slumber. How delicious to wake in one's sleep and listen to the croaks of penguins mingling with the sea. To fall asleep and awaken again and feel this is real. We have reached land.
There was not enough shelter to remain where they were. 2 days later, Shackleton led the men to a second landing on the western side of the island. The new campsite was called Cape Wild, after Frank Wild. To the sailors, it was Cape Bloody Wild.
Dear Diary, it is a land of nature's moods, inhospitable, angry. Its sinister cliffs rising sheer from the sea, and girt by treacherous rocks and swirling reefs. Excepting for 2 or 3 possible landings, the island is inaccessible.
The boats landed in sleet and rain. That night, a gale blew up, ripping one of the tents to shreds and blowing equipment out to sea. Men crawled under the boats for shelter. They lay shivering in their Burberry smocks as the wind hurled snow onto them. The blizzard raged for 5 days. Even the most hardened, like Hurley and Macklin, were daunted.
One of the most unpleasant mornings, atrociously cold and blizzardy, with dense drift and not a square inch of shelter. Number 5 tent torn to shreds. The ring penguins, having had enough of the weather, congregated en masse on the beach and migrated during the morning. Lucky birds. Ah, to be a penguin.
I think I spent this morning the most unhappy hour of my life. All attempts seemed so hopeless, and fate seemed absolutely determined to thwart us. Men sat and cursed, not loudly, but with an intensity that showed their hatred of this island on which we had sought shelter.
Shackleton had saved his men, in the sense he'd got them all alive out of the ice and onto terra firma. But now how to get back to civilization? Elephant Island was off any conceivable shipping route. Not only that, she was nowhere near the routes of the whalers and sealers that used to come down there. So somehow Shackleton had to get his men to a port of call, even if it was only a lonely island where the sealers came.
Facing impossible odds, Shackleton made a bold decision. He wouldn't sit and wait. He would fetch help. Cape Horn, the closest land, was beyond reach, as they could not sail into the prevailing wind. But in the path of the wind lay the island from which they'd set out, South Georgia. Shackleton conceived a daring plan. He would set out in a small open boat to cross 800 miles of the world's most dangerous ocean. Work began immediately on the James Caird. Earlier, McNish had raised her gunwales with wood from packing cases. Now he cannibalized the other two boats to reinforce her. He sealed the seams with the expedition artist's oil paints and seal's blood.
It wasn't only that McNish was a good shipwright, a good ship's carpenter, but he appeared to have something extra. He had a streak of ingenuity, of the real ability to improvise, to make something out of nothing. And I think this was connected with a strain of perversity, of cussedness. And here's another paradox. This was the mutineer who'd come good.
Shackleton selected the few who would accompany him with great care.
His final choice of crew was a clever mixture between a couple of people who were awkward customers who would probably have caused trouble if they were left on the island and undermined the morale, and a couple of people who were really strong Antarctic stalwarts.
Proudly, McNish recorded his own inclusion, joining Tom Crean and Tim McCarthy, tough Irish sailors. The demoted boatswain John Vincent was also redeemed. Shackleton recognized his strength and skill, the result of years on trawlers in the brutal conditions of the North Atlantic. Captain Frank Worsley had navigated the boats to Elephant Island. Now he would have to find a tiny speck in an immense ocean. This erratic and impulsive New Zealander held their lives in his hands. Frank Wild, Shackleton's right-hand man, would be in charge of the men left behind. As the expedition split up, he faced the unenviable task of leading 21 demoralized, ill-equipped, partially incapacitated men on a deserted, gale-raked island.